Good evening, everybody. Welcome to the third quarter webinar for youth workers, a part of the ministry of the Orthodox Youth Directors in North America. We're very pleased this quarter to be able to present to you Presbytera Krista West, who has quite a resume. I'm going to share a little bit with you what she does and what she's been doing. Her topic tonight is Cultivating Beauty, and we're not going to have a formal presentation. It's more going to be an interview back and forth and see where the Spirit takes us. But let me give you a little bit of biographical information first. First of all, Krista, thank you for joining us tonight. I'm excited to have you with us. Let me tell everybody about you. You can also find out about this on her website, KristaWestVestments.com. But Krista West was born in Portland, that magical city in the land of Oregon, and began sewing at the age of 4. It's already like a fairy tale, you see. Her love of handcrafts as a child and her conversion to Orthodox Christianity in 1993 led to an interest in the Orthodox ecclesiastical vesture. She began Krista West Vestments in 1997, with her focus quickly turning to Greek style. She has sewn for clergy and for churches in 48 of the 50 states, vestments and also paraments. That's a term that we've adopted now very much in our parish to distinguish. Vestments are clothing, paraments are the things that go on tables and icon stands and so forth. In 2002, Krista began to research the origins of Orthodox Christian vestments, and her research and fieldwork led to her book, The Garments of Salvation, Orthodox Christian Liturgical Vesture, which was published by St. Vladimir Seminary Press in 2013. It's the first comprehensive book on this subject in English and is therefore the definitive work on the subject as far as I'm concerned. In 2017, she opened, how do you say this, Avlea? Avlea, folk embroidery, which we'll talk about a little bit too, I think, tonight, after seeing the desire of many Orthodox Christians to bring the kind of beauty they saw in their churches into their own homes. And it is her delight to design folk embroidery patterns as a way of helping make ancient beauty accessible to the modern home. It is her firm belief that beauty in the home of the faithful will sustain and broaden the ascetic traditions of the church into the next generation. As you will find, Krista speaks with precision, a combination of seriousness and joy. She knows her work. She knows her stuff. It's pretty intense. And it's not surprising that she also gives talks and leads retreats, as well as hosting a podcast on Ancient Faith Radio, appropriately entitled The Opinionated Tailor. Just this year, she's also expanded some of the things she does because of the pandemic, being unable to travel as much and give retreats in person. She has put on her website and made available a 4-part lecture series on Orthodox Christian ascetics based on her popular retreat, covering the why and the how that beauty is engaged in the church, with practical tips on how to incorporate into parish life. She was also recently interviewed for the Luminous podcast by Dr. Peter Butenev, who is also one of our contributors at our Youth and Camp Worker Conference this year, and her interview was about aesthetics, the place of textiles in sacred art, the interaction of patterns and symbols, and why beauty is so important. She now lives in Salem, Oregon, with her husband, Father Alban West, and their youngest daughter, where she works, as you can see, in her basement studio of their 1923 home that they are restoring. So thank you, Krista. I hope that's a lot, but I know it's not everything. And as some of we have a variety of people that joined us on the webinar. Some are youth workers. Some are ecclesiastical tailors, some are Sunday school teachers, some are people who are just interested in the subject of beauty. So we have a really wide audience, and of course we're recording this for others later who also want to watch it. Our topic at our conference last, I guess it was January, maybe February, it was a while ago now, was on the subject of the ministry of forming beautiful youth. And so our topic kind of over the course of the whole year has had to do with the role of aesthetics, but also how it relates to youth ministry. Now, you don't do youth ministry as a full-time thing, so some people might wonder why we picked you. But I think they're going to quickly find out that what you're going to tell us about the importance and the power of beauty is something that we can very easily and I would say necessarily must include in the work that we do with young people. So just to kick things off, I'd like to ask you kind of the softball in a nutshell. Why is beauty important in the Orthodox Church, and why should we be paying attention to it?
Well, I think this is a really good question. And before I answer that, I do just kind of want to answer the question, the sort of topic of things being specific for youth. And beauty is not ageist. And I'm actually particularly sensitive to ageism because I do think that a lot of times we think that certain things are only available to certain demographics or certain people literally because of their age on a calendar. And it's kind of pointless. So because the thing is, I mean, I've met 5-year-olds that are more aesthetically attuned than 50-year-olds, and especially in the church, because a lot of 5-year-olds haven't had time to have society or someone tell them that something is wrong or that something is right or that something needs to be a certain way. They're much more open. And I would say that that's the same too for a lot of teens. A lot of teens and a lot of youth are still very, very aesthetically open. And I think that's a really great state of affairs, because to really answer your question, the reason beauty is so important, kind of in a nutshell, is because all acts of beauty are actions towards and with God. Beauty is a praxis, okay? So we say praxis, like we say, okay, a dentist has a dental practice or a lawyer has a law practice. Okay, we as Orthodox Christians, we've got a beauty practice. And our job is to be as beautiful as we can be and to be looking for every opportunity of creating beauty in our own souls, in our community, in the world we find ourselves. Because if we are busy doing this, and if we're caught up in this praxis, this practice of beauty, then we don't have time to sit around and worry about whether we're right and somebody else is wrong. I think beauty is an incredible antidote to judgment. And if any of our youth workers have read any of the recent studies on millennials and younger and religious participation, they'll know firsthand that one of the most important things that we can do in reaching youth is to be non-judgmental. And I really think this is very, very important. And I think that beauty can be one of those things that we use to be very non-judgmental. There's not like a specific type of beauty that's like better than another type of beauty. And I say that kind of like in my sort of like, ecclesiastical tailor rock star status. Okay. There's a lot of people who think that because I'm making investments, I'm somehow special. I'm like a special snowflake in beauty, but I'm so not. It doesn't matter if I'm making vestments or if I just sewed a kitchen towel or if I embroidered something that I was just going to put in my house to make my house more beautiful. All of those things are equal. Not one is better than the other. As long as they're done with intention and as a means of appreciating and affirming the beauty in creation and the beauty that we see in other people and the beauty that we want in our own selves and our own souls, this is the important thing. This is why beauty is so important. Really, honestly, it kind of keeps us out of trouble.
Yeah, I was thinking about, we just had the Met Gala.
Oh, yeah.
And of course, now you're seeing all these incredible designs and dresses and things like that. People trying to interpret that. There is a fascination with beauty, obviously on a very kind of worldly way, but there's definitely, and young people are drawn to that. I was watching the critique videos of the fashion designs with my 16-year-old daughter.
Yeah.
And it's a good experience and seeing, what is the stuff that they're cluing into. And I think
the craft, I think that's something we really miss. But that's something I can remember going to the Metropolitan Museum of Art a number of years ago when I was lecturing at St. Vlad's, and they had a textile exhibit out, which they don't always do. And it was costumes of, I believe, the late 1800s. And the skill, like just in the seaming and everything like that, there's a whole level that someone like me sees. And that a lot of younger people are actually, they're becoming aware of the whole world of fashion and things like that as a craft-based world and a skill-based world. And I think that's very, very appealing to a lot of to a lot of people in general. People want to be good at something.
So, this is such a broad topic. I'm trying to find a way to pin it down here for a second. But what do you think? We have people who are doing ministry now.
Yeah.
You're a presbytera. You've seen kind of the behind the scenes and up close look of what ministry looks like in the church. How would you recommend for people who are not necessarily, ecclesiastical tailors or even particularly craft proficient at all?
Sure.
How could somebody who's just trying to do ministry, maybe a priest, maybe a youth minister, how could they incorporate this quest for beauty and this cultivation of beauty in their daily ministry?
Okay. So I think the very first thing I would say, oh gosh, sorry, it's my 11-year-old. She's on my priority list. So she always comes through whether or not on my phone. Sorry about that interruption. Okay, so the first thing that I would say that's kind of it's paradoxically it's kind of the easiest and the most complicated thing is to pay attention to your environment. A lot of people, they need to start there. A lot of people, and there's a lot of new research coming out about people being influenced on very deep psychological levels by their environment. So this is not me saying go out and become Martha Stewart, not at all. I'm saying look around your environment and start noticing on all the levels how it affects you. So are you a person who needs more natural light? Are you a person who does better with less clutter? Are you a person who needs greenery and plants? I decided that like last year, I was like, I need plants in the workshop, and I moved plants in, and it just makes me happy. And it feels, I even while I'm designing something or cutting out like a brocade, I can look up and see like this plant with these amazing leaf structures and designs in it. And it's incredible. So I feel like environment is something that you can spend a lot of time on, and it's something that we can kind of continually come back to. So when I say environment, I mean, this is your home environment. This is like, where are you holding your youth group meetings? I know right now, a lot of places are not holding them in person, but when we do, I've been in plenty of churches who everybody gives the junk to the youth. Like, let's give the worn out couch and let's give all the bad stuff to like the youth, because who cares, but they do care. And it does make a difference. And it doesn't mean that we have to spend a fortune or anything like that. But I think it means that we sort of turn on our awareness in our environment to where there are opportunities for beauty and where there are things that we need to edit out. Oh my word, don't even get me started on like church narthexes. Oh Lordy. Like church narthexes are like in such a crisis state in most places in the United States. It's like there's clutter and there's dust and there's dirt. It's really, really basic stuff. And as youth workers, like for example, I mean, this just comes to mind. I'm sure fairly soon, hopefully, we're going to all be able to like start getting back together again. When that happens, if you're a youth worker and you're in charge of a youth group, get everybody together and find the space that you hang out, or wherever the space is that you can kind of craft, if it's a Sunday school room or like a portion of the church basement or whatever, and get those youth involved with you on like actually setting it up as a pleasant and beautiful space to be together. Because even honoring the environment honors the people in the environment. And like, people might be like, oh, no, we don't do this. I'm like, as Orthodox Christians, this is exactly what we do. Just look at a church. We pay attention to every last little detail. The iconostasis, the plants, the candles, the paraments, the vestments, all of this. And we look at this as this microcosm of beauty. Well, you can kind of do that anywhere. You can do that at your desk. You can do that, in one little corner of your living room. You can do that in a youth group room. You can do that in your office. You can do it anywhere, your church narthex. So I think that's the very first thing I would do, especially for people who think that they're no good at beauty. When people think that they're no good at beauty, it usually means that like, I'm not crafty, or I'm not good at sewing, or like, I can't build things or whatever. It's like, we kind of have to think a little bit broader than that. If I had a nickel for every time somebody says to me, oh my gosh, I can't sew a button on, It's the very first thing that 95% of people say to someone when they find out that they work as a tailor is, oh my gosh, I can't sew a button on. Trust me, after 30 years, yeah, this is what they say. And I'm like, I don't care if you can sew a button on. Maybe you can like make an amazing cup of tea, or maybe you're like awesome at making incredible chili. And like, maybe you're great at hosting an event for your neighbors, or, you know, maybe you're the person who grows tons of tomatoes and puts them out in a basket on your sidewalk for your neighbors. I mean, if you just start really looking around, there are opportunities to be beautiful to other people everywhere, like literally everywhere. And so we have to first off start by expanding our idea of beauty. Beauty is not just pretty things. And a lot of people get really sucked up in that. They're like, well, it's just pretty things. And I'm not good at pretty fussy things. I'm here to tell you, I'm one of the least like fussy-ish kind of people. Like if people come to me and like want fussy vestments, I'm like, no way, don't do them. If you look at my style is actually quite masculine, very geometrically driven. I don't do fussy. I don't do sentimental. I don't do any of that crap because I don't like it. And it's like, it's not my thing. But okay, maybe it is your thing. Maybe you just groove on going to Home Goods and finding and creating like a little tableau. That's great too. You know what? We need all of this. We need everybody at least doing the intention, because here's the thing. I'm having intention when I'm saying, okay, I'm doing geometrically inspired early Byzantine vestments. That's my focus, blah, blah, blah. Or I'm doing like a Baltic border folk embroidery kit, blah, blah, blah. But maybe your focus is like, I'm creating this amazing nurturing space in my house for like my kids. You know, this is all important. It feels paradoxical because as Americans, we're very Aristotelian in our outlook and very black and white. We want to know, is it right or is it wrong? Right? Is it wrong? Oh, Lord. If we would stop asking as Orthodox Christians, is it right? And start asking, is it beautiful? It entirely reframes the question. And you can pretty much apply this to anything. Okay, so you've got a neighbor. Okay, you've got a neighbor who is, I don't know, some other tribe than is your tribe. Fill in the blank of whatever tribe you don't like, because everybody's got a tribe they don't like. Okay, well, is it beautiful? Oh, first off, okay, say you have a basket of tomatoes. Is it right that you take a basket of tomatoes to your neighbor? Well, probably not, because you don't support that lifestyle. But is it beautiful for you to take a basket of tomatoes that you have access to your neighbor and not judge them and just share them with your neighbor? I kind of think Christ is pretty clear about this in the Gospels. Kind of feel like that one's been covered. So we're looking for these opportunities to be beautiful to ourselves and to humanity. This is our calling as Orthodox Christians.
What if you split the difference and just throw the tomatoes at their house? Is that okay?
Well, yeah, there we go. We have issues with that too, I think. Yeah. So this is it. I feel like if you don't take anything else away from this tonight, I want you to really expand your idea of what could be beautiful and just look at all the different opportunities. Okay. I went to Trader Joe's the other day and the poor clerk, okay, we have a lot of regulars, clerks at our Trader Joe's. They're clearly very happy in their jobs. So we know each other. We see each other every week. Hey, it's Krista. Hey, hello. One of the guys has infant twins. I mean, this guy just looks strung out all the time. He looks sleep deprived and exhausted all the time. And I went in and I was like, oh man, you just look really sleep deprived. So maybe the most beautiful thing I can do for you is just not talk to you. Like maybe we just need to stand here in silence, you know, while you check out my groceries, because it's got to be exhausting for you to like try to make small talk with me when you're so tired from your twin children. Maybe it's that. But maybe conversely, you go to the post office later on and the clerk looks kind of down and you're like, gosh, how are you doing? I just want to say thank you for being an awesome postal clerk. Like, yay-hoo for the U.S. Postal Service. These things don't really take much effort, but they do take noticing and intention.
Random acts of kindness and senseless beauty, right?
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
So I have an off-centered question, but because you spurred. Are you familiar with Maria Kondo?
Oh. I love her book, True Confessions. I love her whole system. I think it's actually really great, personally. I know people have mixed feelings about her, but I just think it's such a great way to approach our interaction with the material world. Yeah, I'm a fan.
Yeah, and even though, I mean, it's kind of clear that she's coming from a traditional Japanese worldview and so forth, I think there's a lot there that actually can overlap with our Orthodox point of view. First of all, she's got the kind of the Eucharistic element of just giving thanks for everything, which
Yes.
is huge. And then the recognition of beauty, but the way, you know, she puts it in terms of sparking joy. And I think it's interesting because she also, you know, she wants it to be, she takes it literally. If you touch it, you need to touch it. And if you feel joy, if you feel a spark almost, then you know it's real. If you're just like, meh, then you know that's not really the thing. But the goal of it is to get rid of all the stuff that makes you feel meh and have only the things which really create that spark of joy and that sense of beauty, because like you said, it gets to the core of who you are, gets the clutter out, and now you can be focused. I found, segueing into my next question, the pandemic was a great opportunity for this, because obviously being stuck in the house and so forth, what are you going to do? So start going through things and saying, what do you really need? What do you really want? And one of the things that was really valuable for us in our parish, for example, was for every family to construct their own altar. Because at the very beginning of the pandemic, we were completely locked down and people had to do services completely online, but we wanted them to have a focused, centered place. And I found that, like, even just this weekend, I was talking with someone who said, you know, I tried once to go to liturgy at home on Zoom in my pajamas, and I realized I couldn't. And I had to change, and I had to be in the right space in my clothes even.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. As someone who's worked from home for over 25 years, yes, I'm actually getting ready. That's going to be one of my next YouTube videos, is actually what I've learned from working from home for almost 30 years. And that is very, very important. All of these things. And I did a YouTube video on a home icon corner, just showing mine. Mine's quite simple, but I think this is really important as a focal point. I think the home icon corner is very important. And I think we can also do this whole, because it kind of creates this sort of liturgical zone, for lack of a better way of saying that. And I think that actually in Orthodox churches in the United States, we could really up our game on this in our churches too. Because when you go to Greece, it's very common to go into a church and you'll see the great big church, but you'll see like these beautiful kiosks, I think they're called in Russian, but the little shrines, the carved iconographic shrines, and they've got a beautiful cloth on them. And it's like this little place that even within this great big place that is designed for worshiping God, you can go and have this little more intimate moment. And I think those are really incredible spaces, the way those are just designed and how they act in churches in Greece. And I feel like we can basically sprinkle those throughout our homes. It doesn't just have to be in an icon corner. I think, again, I really feel like one of the areas too that people can do this is their desk. I feel like that's an important one, because again, with work from home, it's so easy to feel cluttered. But I learned early on working from home years and years ago that having my desk feel like a place that's grounded and beautiful is really important. And that doesn't take like a lot of stuff, but it just means that you're intentional about how you're putting things together. But I will also say something that I think the pandemic did that was really awesome was it got people making things. Now, I mean, you know, it's almost a cliche now, but like from making bread to learning to embroider to all of these different things that people picked up, I just feel like no conversation on beauty, especially among Orthodox Christians, would be complete without talking about the practice of just making things with our hands. Now, my husband and I served in an Arabic community for 20 years. And so when we first got there, it was almost all first and second generation Arabs. And so we had a lot of the women who I learned a lot of their sort of village traditions and things from them. And we had one woman who always made the sign of the cross over her hummus, you know, and the ones who would, the other one, they would do certain things in threes so that they could say Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. There's all of these ways that we can bring this kind of liturgical expression into our daily lives through making. And that can be making food. That can be, you know, clearly like we talked about, like the Marie Kondo and making a clean environment is one of those ways. But also making things for people who are crafty, because I feel like, you know, we have to have a moment here for the people who are crafty. I do want to give a shout out to youth workers. If you are dealing with kids that are more artistic and crafty, I wouldn't necessarily always push them towards a like, you should become an iconographer, or you should become an ecclesiastical tailor, because frankly, we don't have the industry to really support that in the United States. I just need to be really upfront about that. And I feel like we may be very well intentioned in saying that, but we inadvertently are sending the message that only certain kinds of making or being a craftsman are sort of acceptable in the Orthodox Church. Whereas I would love to see Orthodox video game designers, and I'd love to see Orthodox, wood carving. Oh my word, we need Orthodox wood carvers desperately. I mean, have you seen the state of icon stands in the United States? And we need people that make things. We need people who are like avid bread bakers and like who learn how to make prosphora. People who love cooking and like can bring soup to church and share meals and things like this. So it's really important, I think, if you're working with youth and you see kids who have got a bent for making, to try and help foster that. Now, as a youth worker, you're kind of like, wow, like, I don't know, how would I do that? The greatest thing about kids is you just keep kind of throwing stuff at them. It's like all the different things that I tried by the time I was 18. By the time I was 21, I had done knitting, crochet, hand quilting, sewing, needlepoint, embroidery, silk embroidery. I did like all these things because I just dabbled a little bit in everything until like I kind of settled on the things that I really, really wanted to kind of go in and go really deep in. But a broad sort of making experience, maker experience for youth is fantastic. So maybe for a youth event, maybe you all get together and make bread, or maybe you all get together and make cupcakes and take them to a homeless shelter. And you like, the kids are really crafty, you're going to like decorate the heck out of those cupcakes and it's going to be awesome. But also, if you have kids that are really hands-on and want to do stuff, give them a needle and thread, boys and girls, I should say. Because I have to say, one of the things that was really surprising to me about starting Avlia Folk Embroidery is I am now the inadvertent darling of the male stitching community in the United States. Because so many men who stitch, who do embroidery, were looking for things that weren't sentimental. We're looking for designs that were more geometric and masculine, and folk embroidery is replete with those designs. So say you've got boys. I did actually right before the pandemic hit and we went into lockdown, like 2 weeks before that, I had done a month-long program at my daughter's school in her class on teaching fourth graders to understand how you could take a grid and turn it into a cross-stitch design. And I had a little guy who was on the autism spectrum, and he did actually the most sophisticated design in the entire class. It was incredible. It was a Super Mario cross-stitch that he did completely out of his own head. It was incredible. And so some kids do really, really well when they've got something to do in their hands. Now, those of you who've heard on the, who listened to the Luminous podcast, I am also on the autism spectrum. And so having something to do with my hands is critical. I can't think, I can't process unless I am moving. And I literally, unless I'm sitting down to stitch, I don't sit ever. Like, ask my family. I don't sit unless I'm sick. And even then I'm usually like, well, I might as well get a little embroidery done even while I'm sick. So if you have kids that are particularly fidgety, who seem to have a lot of trouble sitting still, or just who seem particularly artistic, you'll know these kids because I've seen them at summer camp. I've seen them at youth group things. You'll know these kids. Try and, email me. I'll send you, an embroidery kit or something for them, because like these kids need as many making experiences as possible because we don't know what those are going to turn into for them. I met a girl recently who really got into welding. She's in her 20s and she's now going through like an entire welding program. And we were chatting about the fact that my husband's grandmother was a welder during World War II in the Navy Yards down in California. And she always talked about how it was like embroidery, how welding was just like embroidery. This was like her joke. And so there's a lot of different fields that people can go into, construction, all different fields, that being able to make and create things is highly valuable, highly valuable.
Yeah, I thank you very much for saying that. I have a son who's was definitely a kinesthetic learner, and now he's in trades, and that's where God's talent shines through him, and it was pretty cool from a young age, and I couldn't be prouder for that. And thinking about that, like getting kids who might be fidgety in church to be doing something, I would totally bless a family if they wanted their kid to be
Oh my
doing
gosh.
any kind of, appropriate craft or holy.
Absolutely. I used to tell my husband, if you would let me embroider in church, I'd be at everything. Like everything. 5 a.m. liturgy, I'm there. As long as I can have my embroidery with me, I'd be there. But yes, I feel like yeah, this would be an area where you'd want to use some, some real pastoral care and concern. But I do feel like, yeah, I mean, if you have a bunch of little kids in the back row embroidering because that's keeping them, occupied and engaged, I'd be all for it. Yeah, why not?
Well, it's all fun and games until somebody stabs somebody with a needle, right? But
Yeah, I know that's true. But
hopefully just themselves in that case.
yeah, exactly.
So I want to ask you kind of one more broad question, then we'll open it up for some questions, and that's to come back to what I had talked to you before we started, which is why, in particular, for our young people, young people thirst. Well, let me back up even more. We just had on Friday a wonderful talk was given by Steve Christoforou of the Y2AM or whatever it is, the youth and young adult ministries of the Greek Archdiocese.
Yes.
He was talking about there's 5 things that the church needs to do for our young people, and we seem to be failing at like all but one of them. And the 5th one and the last one is teaching them the stuff of like dogmas and church history and stuff. We seem to get that part done, but we're missing the, who is Jesus Christ? Do you know him? How do you talk with him? How do you pray with him? How do you engage with him? How do you live a Christian life? We talk about the final part, which is okay, now you know all the other stuff, this is what comes of it. And
right.
We forget to give them all that foundational stuff. I think that this also ties into what we're talking about here, which is you can be right, or you can focus on what's truth through beauty instead of just some kind of ideological or theological approach. And so coming back to my question is, our young people in particular have a thirst for that which is authentic.
Oh, huge. And I'm definitely, yeah. Oh boy, I'm kind of the poster child for this these days, because as we were talking before we started, so most everybody in the Orthodox world knows me because of my vestment work and the book and the podcast and things like that. But a couple of years ago, I started Avlia Folk Embroidery, and I was going to Greece on regular buying trips. And on one of these trips about 10 years ago, I was sitting in the mill agent's office waiting my turn, and I was embroidering. And Dimitri, my friend and mill agent, was like, "You like that stuff?" And I'm like, "Oh, I love this stuff. Like, I never go anywhere without my embroidery." And he's like, "Okay, let's go." And he was like, so he took me to the shop where they like sell all the like historic folk designs, but most of them are in a format that presumes a very high level of skill. They are not designed with like modern, what's called charting software. And so they're really like kind of grainy photographs, and you have to know a lot about textiles just to even use the pattern. And so I came home, got charting software, and started like adapting them just so that I could make things for my own house. And then people started asking me like, where did you get that? Because they're so distinctive. They're so different. They're very historical, very geometric, lots of repeating patterns, things that go back to Roman mosaic work and Byzantine scrolls and designs and all these things. And so I started this little folk embroidery business on the side because I thought, oh, this will be so great. Like, oh, maybe I'll do this when I retire. And I started designing, and I had no idea at the time that no one else in the entire embroidery industry in America was doing anything like this. I went to my first needlework show and got picked up by a distributor. And before I knew it, it was just like, we just took off, and I wasn't expecting it. But I mean, it's been so exciting. And one of the things that I'm finding so exciting about it is how many people of all ages, I think I was telling you this before we started, but my largest demographic of customers is not people over 50. Believe it or not, it's 18 to 35. So my demographic is actually quite young because it's people who are looking for these authentic things, and they want to find a way to be able to be still and be off their phones. Not that phones are bad, but I'm just saying they want that experience of being able to kind of quiet themselves for many people, it opens the door to meditation and meditative prayer in a way that makes it accessible to people who it would not normally be accessible to, for the kinesthetic learners and the people like me that just move all the time. So that was actually one of the hugest surprises to me in opening Avlia Folk Embroidery, but it was absolutely my goal, was that, well, I would really hope that other people would find these designs and really appreciate their authenticity the same way, because the source for all my designs all comes out of historic folk embroidery. I have yet to do anything like totally like from scratch, because the canon of folk embroidery is so vast and huge that I don't even know. I mean, I could maybe like put an octagon on something, but then nope, there'd be like a 17th century octagon, or there'd be a 14th century one, or there'd be a Byzantine one. I mean, these forms and these patterns just go way, way, way back in humanity. And I think they're very, very interwoven with our need as human beings to create. And they're nice because they're portable, they're small, they're inexpensive. That was part of it too, is I had a lot of people, especially in the last like 10 years, they would email me and say, well, I just love your liturgical brocades and I go to church and it's so beautiful and I want something, but like, how expensive is it for, you know, you to make me an altar cloth for my home? And I'm like, wow, well, let's start about at $300, which is like the cheapest fabric, but like all the fabrics we use for churches are very expensive. And so I realized, no, you don't need a liturgical brocade in your house. You need something handmade and beautiful, whether that's an heirloom, whether it's something you found at Goodwill, whether it's something you made yourself. And this sort of authenticity, it brings this amazing aesthetic energy into your environment. It's just huge. So people who have one authentic like experience, they want more. They just want more and more and more. So I think that this sort of feeding this sort of authenticity, you just really can't go wrong with it with youth. We need to be authentic. We need to be real. We need to not be fake people. We need to not be shibboleths. We need to not be doing these crazy things of just trying to tell them, well, we're right. Like you say, the dogmas, seriously, doesn't everybody remember being 16? I'm like, dogmas? Are you kidding me? Like, no way. Like, I was reading Chaim Potok and thinking deep thoughts about art when I was 16. Most 16-year-olds are like having these deep experiences because they're growing into adulthood. They're individuating from their families. They've got a lot going on in their brain space. And I feel like a lot of times we don't honor that. I feel like we're kind of patronizing about it. And I feel like we're not understanding. I'm like, you know what? Just sit for 5 minutes and remember what it was like to be 15 or 16 and just how big the world felt or overwhelming or these sorts of things. Then you throw in kids who have had trauma of any kind, which is like, actually, okay, wait, most of humanity. And now we know, it's actually one of the articles I just wrote for a national magazine was on stitching as a wellness practice. Mm-hmm. And I had to do a deep dive into the secular research on the psychological and mental health benefits of handwork. And it was fascinating. They're starting to use things like knitting and handwork and carving and bread baking and these sorts of things in occupational therapy. They're using it to fight depression. They're using it for PTSD with soldiers, believe it or not. It's going all over. And I sort of feel like as Orthodox Christians, it's like, we kind of own this world. Like, we do folk embroidery and we do wood carving and we do all this stuff. So I feel like if we can put that in our people's hands and give them that focus and encourage them, I think it's a really, really great thing. We just have these incredible, powerful tools that are, frankly, I mean, no offense, but like they're way more powerful than Dogma. Dogma is just not going to keep a 16-year-old at church. I hate to break it all to you, but it's just not going to happen. Well, but a beautiful experience is totally going to keep them there. Exactly.
Those dogmas have to become real.
Exactly.
And they're not just something that float up here. They're experienced through the life of these sacramental ways of living.
We are so incarnational. And we don't talk about this enough as Orthodox Christians, but we get messy. Like, we like matter, you know? Like, it's our thing. And I feel like we don't talk about that enough because a lot of other traditions and faiths and things like that, they're kind of all up, upstairs all the time. They're all thinking and doing all the thinking. I'm like, you know what? A lot less thinking and a lot more doing would do us all a lot of good.
Amen. Well, thank you. I want to open it up for questions from those who are attending the webinar tonight, if they have any questions. So you've all had a chance to think about what Krista said, and I don't want you to be shy, so please ask us a question.
Ask away.
I'm very glad that you ended where you ended, by the way, because tentatively our next speaker, God willing, will be Dr. Timothy Patitsas.
Perfect.
Who talks
that'll be a good
about
segue. Yeah, that'll be
the
good.
power of beauty. So
yeah.
Okay, we have a question, yay. Okay, Kathleen asks, how to encourage teens to keep trying things if they aren't finding something based on the crafts they try?
Just more media. So in the art world, anything that you do to make something like beautiful, to make art, is called a medium. So if you're an oil painter, oil paints are your medium. For me, fabric and floss is my medium, or brocades are my medium. So the biggest thing you want to do is just keep throwing as many media, which is the plural of medium, at them as possible. So for example, my 11-year-old can't stand being in the workshop, hates to sew, and is an amazing cook. She makes bread, she bakes bread. And the other day I came up from work and she'd made cupcakes for me. It was awesome. I feel like this is really good in our household, that one of us sews and one of us cooks. We're going to be set if the apocalypse comes. But I think that the biggest thing is keep trying different things and go broad. So that would be things like different YouTube videos on how to do things, visiting your local art supply store or something like that, or even just Amazon, just clicking and looking around Amazon at what are different things that you can do, like art supplies. You might be surprised, there's so many different million things out there. But wait, and what was somebody telling me? 5-minute crafts on YouTube is a thing now. And so checking out the 5-minute crafts, just different things that people can do, because some people in making things, they like to be kind of quick and fast and broad strokes. And then some people like to get really intricate and fine and all the little fussy stuff. And it helps if you just try different things, because different media are sort of associated with different things. Like a palette knife lays on paint quick and fast. But a cross stitch needle, wow, I'm lucky if I can cover a 1-inch by 1-inch area in 30 minutes. So sometimes it can be helpful to try and sort of look at that from that angle. But I would say continue putting media in front of them. And think broad, think cooking, building, anything like that they can be exposed to. A lot of it's about exposure. STEAM classes can be great. If they take any sort of wood shop or science, technology, engineering, and math classes that are hands-on. My daughter is actually doing a STEAM class right now, and they're building bridges. And that's been great too, because she's getting these conceptual ideas. Math is an amazing, many people feel like math is a very, very beautiful and artistic language on its own. So think really big and think kind of just anything that comes to mind to kind of do this kind of media. Think about different media, because that's a great way to play around with art, and all of that is just trying different things to mess around with. Yeah.
We have a plan at our parish for our youth group this year or our Sunday school to build a garden bed this fall.
I love that.
Next year to do planting, and then by transfiguration and dormition, we'll have the fruits and the vegetables and the herbs and the flowers for the service.
Perfect. That is such a great idea. And in any youth group, you're gonna have the kids who are better at building, and you're gonna have the kids who are better at going through the seeds and planting all the perfect seeds. You're gonna have the kids who are better at hauling dirt. My husband is an amazing gardener, truly gifted. He grows a full garden. We have a 1/4-acre urban lot, and he manages all of it on his own. And we have heirloom roses and everything. And me, you know what I'm good at? I'm good at hauling dirt. I'm really good with a wheelbarrow. And I just go out and okay, point and shoot. Tell me where to go with the dirt, because I'm really not that great at gardening, but he's really good at it. So yes, I'm really glad you brought up plants, because plants are also another thing, kind of in the cottage core and the grand millennial decor and all that stuff. Plants are really hot right now. So maybe somebody does need to work with plants. That's another really great artistic medium. I have a friend who actually owns a plant store. And every time I go in, I call it plant church, because it's I get a similar feeling going into her shop with just the peacefulness and the colors and everything that I do going into church. So yes, that's another great example. That would be awesome. Oh my gosh. And they take this way more seriously overseas. Like in Greece, they really pay huge amounts of attention to the gardening around monasteries and churches and things like that. There's a lot of churches here in the US have a lot of space where we could do stuff like that. And with our youth would be an incredible project. And what a sense of accomplishment for them that they did this and they gave this to their community, because it's real work. You know, it's the thing too, I think with kids, we have to be really careful of is let's please not give them any fake work. No make work for the kids. Like, you know, really, that does not set them up well for in life. Yeah.
Yeah, no busy work. Okay, we have a couple more questions.
Okay, great. Sorry.
First question from anonymous attendee. Do you have any suggestions for youth groups to, okay, this is kind of redundant, but to help teens try crafts? We have done no sew blankets for the homeless, for example, which doesn't require a lot of skill.
Yes. Yes. So again, on that, I would be looking on YouTube for like no skill crafts or no sewing projects or things like that. We did painted boxes. I was the arts and crafts lady at our summer camp for a number of years. And we did these beautiful little wooden boxes. We got them on Amazon and we painted them with house paint. And then we got gold metallic markers and we did Byzantine borders all over them. And those were really cool. And then people use them for like their incense box, things like that. And different things like that. You can do wood crafts. You can do painting. You can even find out, is there anywhere in your church that like actually needs to be painted? Maybe not in the nave, but you know, somewhere else that you could turn some kids loose. And any sort of thing like that. I would say hands-on cooking projects, like again, baking bread and things like that can be very good depending on what your kitchen setup is. But I think the biggest resource on this is going to be like Instagram and YouTube, looking, and Pinterest, looking for sort of no-sew crafts or easy crafts can be great. And you'd be surprised. I mean, some of those things are very sort of quick and dirty, you know, the macaroni, you know, chain necklaces, but there's some really sophisticated stuff out there that you can do without a lot of skill. And I'd be looking for things like that. Yeah.
Great. Next question is a little back to the question of beauty. Our youth are bombarded with images and actions that we would not normally consider beautiful from an Orthodox perspective, but the world says are beautiful. How would you recommend we have a discussion with them about discerning true beauty without shutting them down?
Well, okay, right here, we're back to the whole question. When you say discerning beauty, you're basically saying what beauty is right. That's really how you're framing this question. And so I would actually say we don't do that. What we need to do is talk with kids. What do they find beautiful? And just listen. I think on this one, we need to be really careful about telling them that there is one, you know, when you discern beauty, you are valuing beauty. Like we were just talking before we started about the Met Gala and the costumes made at the Met Gala. And some of them were incredibly over the top, but some of them are really amazing. And so like, I think it'd be perfectly fine to have a conversation with a youth, you know, that was really interested in fashion and talk about the craftsmanship that goes into that. I mean, most people are not able to take something that's 2D like paper and turn it into a 3D essential fabric sculpture, which is what many of those costumes and garments are. It's very complex and sophisticated type of engineering work. And so I actually feel like we need to be very careful. We don't need to discern beauty for youth at all. We just need to talk about beauty and let's just see where the conversation leads us. I think we need to listen. I don't think we actually need to talk at them at all. I think we need to listen and find out what in their generation, what is appealing to them, what is beautiful, and give them some space to actually talk to us about why they think this is beautiful. But we need to be really careful about using the word discern, right. It's all that rightitude. And that's honestly, I'll just tell you, if you want to send your kids out of your youth group, just do that because that's the fastest way to do it. According to every study, every metric, all the research being done in the last 20 years, anything that is judgy or rightist or like that, or we're trying to push a certain, I don't know, a certain what?
Gatekeeping.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We just cannot do that. And so I think it would be interesting to have a conversation with them and say like, okay, hey, let's find out, like, okay, let's talk about the costumes at the Met Gala and let's like talk about our vestments. Like, ooh, like that's kind of interesting. Like we wear pretty dresses in church too. So it's like, how do we have a conversation?
I recently heard an interview that really struck me. It was talking about why artists, and they were talking about musical artists in this case, generally produce the most kind of impactful and definitive works early, not too early, but once they hit a certain point, they can never really quite hit where they were. There's a point of their development as an artist where innocence and experience intersect at just the right amount of tension with each other, that they can truly produce something that will stand the test of time.
Yes, in certain fields, especially things like writing and music. In the more skilled arts, like what I'm in, I mean, I feel like I'm 25 years in, I feel like I'm still learning things. So those are kind of different things, but I do agree, like, with what you're saying. And there's a general kind of thinking in the artistic community, from what I've read, is that there's kind of two paths. And one is that younger combination of innocence, and you're just at a very, very different place of brain development when you're 18, 19, 20. Your frontal lobe has not finished developing until you're 25. So you're in a very, very different state than, say, someone who's 35 or 40. And this is the sort of thing that I feel like we oftentimes struggle with when we are talking to youth, is we sort of feel like, well, we know better, we're older, all these things. And again, I just feel like, you know what, just remember what it's like to be 14 or 15. You know, think back to your first year or second year in high school. And what was that like for you? And how did, in both good and bad, you know, in what ways was the world kind of traumatic and overwhelming? But also, in what ways did you see beauty and majesty and the cosmos? Like, what ways did you feel that as a teenager that you don't feel now as an adult? Because that's something that closes too, you know? So I feel like that sense of wonder and that sense of beauty, basically, if you just try to manage kids' perception of beauty, they just won't talk to you. They'll keep having these experiences. They'll just shut you out of that. And they'll just go quiet, and they're not going to participate. And, you know, kids like that, we run the risk as Orthodox Christians as losing kids that can come into our tradition who have these skills and talents.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I grew up in a completely redneck family that never went to church. My family swore and drank and built cars on the weekend. Okay. I didn't even really darken the door of a church till I went to church with a friend when I was 10. But when I got there, I knew what I was dealing with because I had spent a huge amount of my childhood in the foothills of Mount St. Helens in a very primitive cabin with no electricity. And we eventually had running water, which was great. But there was a forest all around us. And so when I first went into a church, for me, I knew what majesty was like because I'd grown up in the forest. And so we need to be really careful about trying to put a lot of barriers and a lot of gates around people's experience. I want to see lots of experience coming into the Orthodox Church because that's what we need to regenerate our artistic traditions. If you just keep making it smaller and smaller and smaller and more and more and more confined, what do you end up with? A really small box.
Yeah. Absolutely. And the last question that we have here is kind of a great follow-up to that. And we've been talking about it. How do we get our teens to open up to us about this type of stuff?
Oh, okay. Patience. That's all I got to give you, people, but that's what it is with teens. So my oldest daughters are 23 and 21, and my youngest daughter is 11. We have a big gap between our girls. And I will tell you, having raised two teenagers and then my other thing was I was actually the executive director of one of the Orthodox summer camps out here in the Pacific Northwest every summer for 5 years. So, and one of the things that I did a lot with was working with our young adult staff. That was sort of my thing, was actually helping to find and train our young adult staff. And I think a lot of this is all about trust and patience. And I think also you need to be really careful about your reactions, really careful about what you're showing with your face, because the minute you show any sort of like judgment or any sort of like, you know, you're going to lose them. They're just going to walk. They're just not going to open you up to that part of their world. So I think that a lot of this is about being patient. And we've got to work on ourselves to like be beautiful souls and be honest and authentic with them. and maybe look for the points in, like, say, the secular world on Pinterest, on Instagram, where you saw something really beautiful. Currently, I'm obsessed with truck campers. It's kind of a long story, but I'm very obsessed with truck campers. And I find them like a technological marvel because they're like so small. And some of them are ugly as sin and stuck in the 90s, like decor. Oh my word. The 90s called and they want their plush upholstery back. But there's these new European companies that are doing these truck campers that look like little ship's cabins. Oh my gosh, we could have a conversation for like 30 minutes all about truck campers and like the beauty and how things are designed. Meet your kid where they're at. If they like Minecraft, what do they like building in Minecraft? If they're drawn to music, what is it about the music that they really, really like? One of my daughters is really into Irish punk. And like, I'm like, okay, tell me what is it about? I don't know. What is it about Irish punk? And she's always giving me musical recommendations. I'm like, okay, let me listen to this. Like, awesome. So the most important thing is you just need to be patient and you need to be willing to listen to them and not like no judgment. That's the most important thing, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of like a general principle of youth ministry in general. I think.
I would actually say it's a general principle of humanity, personally.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you know, like we kind of owe this to each other as human beings. But yeah.
Absolutely, yeah. General principle of anything, but especially ministry, is that to get respect, you've got to give respect.
Absolutely, you don't just get it because you're the person at the front of the room. Mm-mm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I'm also reminded of talking about when we want to share experiences of beauty between people. The Psalms say, "Deep calls to deep."
Yes.
That there's something deep within each one of us.
Yeah.
That responds to beauty, and we don't necessarily know what the channels are through which that beauty will percolate down into us, but but when it gets there, you know,
and remember, we have this entire tradition of not knowing in Orthodox Christianity, and a lot of people forget this or they're not aware of it. But we have an entire tradition that we are all about not knowing. And I think that's something that would really serve us very, very well. Very well, is just be aware of what we don't know and be comfortable with it. Be comfortable with not knowing. Don't feel like you have to know everything. I just think that's really important. When I was maybe 23 years old, I would have been 24. It was the first year we moved to seminary. We moved all the way across the country. Believe me, for a redneck girl who'd grown up in, the foothills of Mount St. Helens, it was a very huge culture shock to move to Boston. And one of the things we did is one of my coworkers at the time, I was working in an engineering firm. And one of my coworkers was like, oh, you should go see an Irish band because like that's something you do in Boston. Like, okay. So we get these tickets to this coffee shop and we end up, without even knowing, we end up at the Battlefield Band's like one coffee club concert in all of Boston. For those of you who are not aware, the Battlefield Band is an incredibly famous Irish band. And that night they were playing a 50-seat coffee house outside of Boston. And we got there. Again, we had no idea what we were signing up for. We just went because my coworker said it was a good idea. We end up getting seated right in the front row in front of John McCusker, who is a legendary fiddling prodigy. He's been playing since he was a teen and he's just incredible. So we're sitting like 6 feet from this person who's incredibly like famous in the fiddling community. And he starts playing. And I just remember thinking, oh my God, like I am in the presence of greatness. Like this person and this band, oh yeah, these people have got a connection like to the divine and the cosmos. It was so apparent to me. And the whole concert, it just went on for 2.5 hours. And it was like, it was like we hadn't been there 5 minutes when it finished. And it was this incredibly like otherworldly experience, so think about experiences you've had like that and talk with your youth about them. It's not like you're going to send them away from the church. It isn't like they're going to all like go just like hang out at Irish pubs listening to music all the time. But they are going to feel more connected to you if they feel like you're seeing beauty everywhere too.
Absolutely. I think on that note, we should all head out to an Irish pub right now.
Yeah.
But on behalf of all of our Orthodox youth workers, I just want to thank you so much. This has been wonderful, inspiring, refreshing,
Great.
recharging, reaffirming for the kind of.
Oh, and one thing I will tell you guys actually is youth workers. Oh gosh, I forgot to mention this. If you want to do any like Avlia kits for your youth groups, or you want to use them as a fundraiser, email me and I'll give you the instructions to get to the Avlia wholesale website. We have like a secret wholesale website that shops and stuff use. And we give that out to like youth groups and church bookstores and things like that, so that you can get things that's like 40% off of retail. So if you want to either, you can do it as a youth fundraiser, like you can basically buy the kits and then turn around and sell them at full price and do that. Or you can use it as a way to like get kits for your kids. So it's not like I'm trying to like push that. It's more just an opportunity for anybody who wants that. I don't want you to feel like you have to go to the site and pay full price. Just email me and I'll give you the stuff you need to get into the wholesale site.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thanks to everybody else who joined us live, and for those of you who watch us later, I hope you enjoyed it, and look forward to joining again in quarter number 4 of 2021, probably early December. We'll let you know. Thank you again, Krista. It's been a great pleasure. May God bless you in your ministry, and thank you again very, very much.
You're so welcome.
God bless.